We were just talking about the Tory pledges, the Labour pledges. Oh, dear me. And one of our guests here was saying a lot of people sort of view these pledges as a bit wishy-washy, right, which I'm sure you'd agree with, but sort of saying that they're Tory light. But that's the point, isn't it? He's trying to win over those Tory voters who feel a bit homeless at the moment.
Well, they are Tory light. If you look at the one in my area, which I think to get 6,500 more teachers, we've actually got 27,000 more teachers since 2010 and 59,000 more teaching assistants, all without destroying our private school sector, which is an important part of the provision for SEND. So they're not only Tory light, they're actually quite destructive. In fact, it's the first time in our history we'll introduce a tax on education, and it will probably result in a bill for about £1.6 billion, so they're ill thought through as well.
You mentioned SEND there. For people who aren't aware, that means special educational needs and disabilities, doesn't it? Why does that play into the private sector?
Because 40% of the special educational needs provision is actually provided by small independent private schools. So when people think of private schools, they always think of the large ones that everybody knows. But there's 2,400 independent schools across our country, and many of them are providing provision either to councils or to parents who are paying for special educational needs. And none of this they've looked into, because it's a really ill thought through policy, and it is to get fewer teachers than we've already got, additional since 2010. So it's really a very poor, very ill-defined and poorly thought through policy, and it will impact both the special educational needs sector, which we're trying to build more places because we know we've got more demand than we're keeping up with, and it will really impact that sector, as well as independent private schools that parents choose to send their kids to.
You're here today to talk about new guidance for relationships, sex and health education in schools. What does this mean for children, and what does it mean for parents?
Well, we introduced guidance first in 2019. It was made statutory in 2020. It was reviewed in 2021. And we got quite a lot of people, teachers and head teachers, who said, you know, we need more clarity. We need to have a little bit more clarity on this. So we put an expert panel in place to put age limits in place. So that's one of the big things we're introducing, which is what's appropriate to be taught at what age. We're also making it crystal clear that it should be transparent to parents, and parents should be able to see the materials. They are the first educators of their children, so they should be able to see what's also going on in school. And we're also on top of our gender questioning guidance, which we published for consultation earlier on. We're also making it very clear that gender identity is a contested view and should not be taught as fact.
Right.
It should not be taught at all, actually.
OK. How? I mean, forgive me, but I mean, I know it's controversial, and I know people have very strong opinions of it, possibly because they don't necessarily have experience of it or know people who've been through this. But how is this not similar to Section 28, which has blighted the Conservatives for years now, when you say, well, there are certain things we're just not going to allow them to be taught because we don't think it's right?
Well, let's be absolutely clear, that is not the same as protected characteristics, which is, you know, the fact that there is people who can reassign their gender. That is different from gender ideology, which is, you know, the 72 genders, or there's different spectrums of a gender, or gendered fluidity, or everyone has a separate gender, like, you know, as well as everything else. So it's the ideology, which you know, nobody probably in you know, reading it would think was true, but it has sort of creeped into the debate. But protected characteristics absolutely are taught, and the fact that adults can reassign their gender absolutely are taught.
Yes, but forgive me, but you're saying then that you can't say that you can be, teachers can't say that you can be born into the wrong body, as it were. However, people who do feel like that and have transitioned are covered by as a protected characteristic. It doesn't make a lot of sense, that, does it?
Well, no, it does make sense. I mean, obviously, we're all born with our biological sex, but people can choose to change their gender when they're adults. And of course, we have dealt with, in the gender questioning guidance, we've dealt with this subject very sensitively to make sure that we first of all, recognise the massive increase. Secondly, take account of what the Dr. Hilary Cass report said as well about there are some negative impacts. You've got to consider the impacts very carefully. It's not a neutral decision. It's not something that should be taken lightly. But that's all dealt with in our gender questioning guidance, which we've already published for questioning. And actually, none of these questions came up in relation to that. So I think that was, that was considered to be the right balance between sort of kindness, compassion, care, and also how to deal sensitively with an issue, but also how to, how to make sure that we protect single-sex spaces and things like that, fairness in sports, etc. So we have dealt with that in that other guidance. This guidance is about how we teach relationship, sex and health education, and it's introducing more guidance to teachers about what's appropriate at what age, and it's also making sure that it's crystal clear that all materials should be made available to parents. That's the main objective of this guidance. But we do reiterate what we have in the gender questioning guidance as well, because that's new guidance.
This guidance, though, has been criticised already, hasn't it? The Chief Executive of the Sex Education Forum has made the point that if topics are to be restricted to children, then children will go and find out information themselves, probably through pornography and other sites on the World Wide Web. I mean, they are exposing themselves to danger there.
Well, we deal with that as well in the guidance, how we make sure we prepare our children for some of the dangers they might see online. But don't forget, obviously we have parents who are the first educators of their children. Then we've put in place what we think is age appropriate, and it's kind of like a building. So you can talk about, the concepts, you can talk about certain aspects of relationship, but then you don't go into the more riskier elements and more dangerous elements until children are older, until children can understand. And there was a lot of concern about potentially some things being taught at a very young age. So we've tried to make sure, children stay as children as when they're a younger age. Then we build on that in secondary school, and then we build on that from the age of 13, 14, etc. So, we have put together an expert panel. It's not me who's done this and decided what's taught, who's taught what at what age. The expert panel has looked at it sensitively, obviously considered the environment such as the internet, and that is mentioned a lot of, that is mentioned in the guidance as well. But parents are also their children's first educators. This is not the only thing that children will get in terms of education.
Keegan.
Parents will also talk to their children.